Hey, so welcome everybody to Consequence of Habit virtual meeting. All are welcome here. We're gonna do something a little different this week. We're gonna record this meeting and then possibly release it at a later date, just because Lewis is taking the time to wake up in the middle of the night and join us here today for Consequence of Habit virtual meeting. So let me go over some of the guidelines here. So the mission of Consequence of Habit nonprofit is to empower individuals and community by bringing awareness to the impact habits have on our mental health, success, and the environment. Some of the discussion guidelines we would have if we were to have a big discussion here today was that that our habits and solutions are as diverse as we are, and we respect each other, and we refrain from giving any unwarranted advice, interrupting each other, talking down from any sort of high ground, or directly commenting on our share. But that does not mean that you can't allow someone's share to resonate with you and remind you of your own experience. But in order to protect privacy in these meetings, we like to say that what you hear here, let us stay here. And of course, you got to be nice. So be kind, or we'll kick you out. You'll be gone. Introductions. Today, it's just Lewis and I, but I'll give you a short introduction. My name is Chris Norris. I'm calling in today from Chiang Mai, Thailand, and I am a 24-year veteran of the U.S. Navy with over a decade of that spent with naval special warfare. I've got multiple deployments under my belt, including combat deployments to Afghanistan and Somalia. And now I'm going to school for Masters of Social Work and meditation and mindfulness advisor for Consequence of Habit, living in Chiang Mai, Thailand with my beautiful wife and our two lovely daughters. Lewis, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name's Luis. I'm currently active duty United States Air Force. Have about 18 years under my belt. Gonna be calling it quits soon. Currently deployed to Al Udeid Air Force Base in Qatar. Um, I've been practicing yoga and meditation for the past, 4 or 5 years. It's been a big impact on my life. I have a beautiful wife and son back at home, and I miss them very much. And looking forward to going back home next month.
Awesome, man. Well, I'll let you take it from here. Here is the topic that you're going to grace us with today. So the floor is all yours.
All right. Well, again, thank you guys for the opportunity. I hope you all get something from this. This is really more just about my story on how I got into mental wellness and mental health, and it began with a yoga practice. So the topic is yoga practice as a gateway for better mental health. Get the slide. So before we get into how it all works, when you hear the word yoga, typically you think of, a down dog or just the physical part of yoga practice, whatever it may be. But the more I dug into it and through my teacher training, I learned that yoga has so much more to offer if we just dig a little bit. So the 8 limbs of yoga is a pretty well-known thing. It was written by Patanjali. He was sort of like a yogi mystic. He wrote this, hundreds or thousands of years ago, and it kind of laid out a foundation or systemic approach to yoga, which is yoga is the union of the self or our spiritual self and the body. And so as you travel through these 8 limbs, you reach the last one, which is samadhi, and that's kind of oneness with everything. You have that union. So if we go through the list, the first 2 limbs of yoga are the yamas and niyamas, which is the ethics and observances. And these are kind of more, if you want to think about religion, kind of 10 commandment-ish, how to treat others, how to treat yourself. Um, there's a lot of there's 5 in each category. So this is how we live in the yoga. And this is before we even start doing postures and anything like that. And even studying these yamas and niyamas, there's a lot of lessons that I took away from how I look at myself, how I look at others, and really started to build that awareness of, where my perspectives come from and, how to look at other people. As we go into the 3rd limb, you think about asanas, which is the physical practice. So when you think of yoga, this is what we're usually associated with it. Going to a class, moving this way, moving that way, breathing. And this is kind of how we start to begin to come into our body and leave the outside world a little bit. Because as you're doing the physical practices, you're really focusing on where your body is, how it feels, you're exercising, you're making yourself feel a little bit better. And then the fourth limb is the pranayama, which is the breath work. And this breath is very, very important when it comes to yoga. It's how you relax. And in any meditation, right? That's how you can tap into that parasympathetic nervous system, or even sympathetic if you want to get yourself really excited. And as you notice, as we go through the limbs, we're kind of diving deeper and deeper within. Right? We start with how we deal with the outside world, the yamas and niyamas, the asanas that we start moving to our physical body, the pranayama, which we start dealing with our breath. And then we go into the fourth limb, pratyahara, which is essentially withdrawal, or really just trying to block out outside stimulus, things we eat, things we take into our body now, really with technology, what we see, what we hear. But we start getting into a more meditative state. We just kind of put down the rabbit hole we go. And then we go into concentration and meditation, which is mental health, right? When we start going within and focusing on ourself and trying to get in touch with that. But going through all of the first 4 to 5 limbs helps us get there. And then with so much work and patience, we reach samadhi, which is the oneness. You think of the yogi on top of a mountaintop, and he's just super zen, enlightenment, that kind of stuff. Again, rarely do people ever get there, but the journey to get there has a lot of benefits to it. So that is kind of the 8 limbs of yoga. So knowing that, we can move on to the next slide. So removing all that granola stuff, right? Talk about oneness and all that spiritual things for people that are more nuts and bolts. The physical practice is what's, to me, a great starting point, and a starting point for a lot of people when we start talking about self-development. I started working out because I wanted to lose weight. Some people may want to begin taking care of their body because of health concerns. Maybe the doctor told them to get their stuff together. Whatever it may be, typically it starts with a physical practice, running, lifting weights, whatever it may be. But what I liked about yoga is that it starts there, but it kind of has some stepping stones. You kind of pick up on some things. So, the good thing about the physical practice is that it grabs attention, right? We feel a lot better. We obviously feel it in our bodies. But for people that I've taught yoga classes for, which is a lot of military males, it's hard to get them to buy in to yoga and practices, mindful practices as well. So what I typically learn is if you just start with that physical, it grabs their attention, because typically they underestimate yoga as a workout. And by doing that, I kind of grab their attention, like, oh, okay, this is something. I can get some benefit here, which is physically. That's how you grab somebody and grab their attention, because they can feel it. And by doing that, I kind of call it default mindfulness, because while you're in these poses, especially if you're new to it, you're just like, oh shit, like you're present. Is basically what I'm getting at. You're very present in the moment. And as you lead the classes, you're telling them to focus, where their legs are, focus where their arms are. And it's really hard to focus on anything else other than the class when you're in the middle of it. And at the end of every yoga class, you have Shavasana, which is our resting, which is essentially a little small meditation. And I kind of said it serves it up in the Sam's Club samples, where, if you go Sam's Club on a Sunday, they usually have samples of whatever, and it's not with any expectation. You just kind of take it like, oh, that's kind of good, or this wasn't for me. But whatever it is, when they're done, when the physical practice is over and they're resting, you serve them a little bit of meditation. And in my experience, typically afterwards, they're like, I really liked that part at the end. I felt super relaxed. I felt really, really good. And I kind of just like, well, you can do that anytime you want. That's meditation. It's just like a different form of it. But, it starts with that physical part to grab their attention, then kind of serve them just a little bit, and maybe get them a little bit curious, and maybe drinking a little bit of the Kool-Aid helps them get down that path. Next slide. So continue to move removing the granola. So how do we get people to start building this into a habit, right? When it comes to yoga, I think making it easy, making it accessible. Um, it's through social media, it's a great tool, but you scroll through, see yogis, you see these crazy poses, headstands, and firefly, all kinds of stuff that I still can't do to this day. So that kind of may turn some people off. Or also, if you go to a yoga class, if you're a male, the class is probably 95% females. So that'll build some kind of resistance to people going to it. And even the word yoga, still, you have a mental picture of the type of person that looks like, or the type of person that it's for. So what I try to do as the ordinary yogi is just try to show that yoga was essentially made for everyone. It was just a practice for wellness. It didn't have to be a certain body type or a certain demographic. Um, so if we can just make it very easy and accessible, for our military folks, having it part of their PT program, or when you talk about corporate wellness, it can just be a thing that you introduce slowly, and making it accessible, making it easy for them. Having introductory classes can kind of start building that awareness and habit of going to a yoga class, or just accepting yoga. And as we start doing it more and more, you introduce new concepts, right? It took me a long time to get into meditation. I practiced yoga for years, and the more I dug into it, the more I liked the physical part. But then I was like, let me start digging into this mindfulness stuff. Let me start digging into this meditation stuff. And it wasn't until I attended yoga teacher training where I learned, like, the what I thought was yoga was just like, I thought it was like a little lake. It's just physical stuff. But as I learned more and more, it's a very vast ocean that it's very deep if you choose to go so. So as you become a yoga teacher, which is the next point, the role of the yoga teacher, I feel, is you're sort of a guide, not only through the physical part, of course, trying to help people alleviate back pain and shoulder pain, things like that, but also kind of showing them little by little, introducing these new concepts of, mindfulness and spirituality, if they're into that, or just showing them how to calm down, or showing them how to relieve some stress without having to do a yoga pose or go through a practice. And that's when you get to see some really cool results. For instance, I have a coworker here. He had mentioned he's always wanted to try meditation. He's just never gone around to it. He wants to relieve stress because he gets spun up at work. And luckily I was there, and I sat him and I said, let him through a 5-minute meditation. It was just him and I in the office, and I told him to breathe and inhale, exhale, and he liked it. And I think he's been practicing about 5 minutes every morning since, and he said it's helped. But it's just building that awareness of yoga meditation, making it for everybody, is kind of what I'm all about. And that's kind of really all I had. I'm sorry if I went a little too quick.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing the screen, and there you go. Yeah. Yeah, that was a good presentation, man. I really appreciate you coming on, and I know it's like, I don't know, 1 o'clock in the morning or something where you're at. So really cool. Um, I know you already like touched on it, but and you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but so like you're right. Like when people mention yoga, I think of girls in yoga pants with frappuccinos, and a
Mm-hmm.
yoga mat over their shoulder on their way to their yoga class. So, didn't yoga, like when it first began, wasn't it exclusively for males? It wasn't really kind of like
Yeah,
the females had to make their way into it.
yeah. It was made by males. I don't know if it was directly for males, but it was put together by guys,
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah. So I don't
Yes.
know. I think when it came over to the United States, I'm not sure where the females really started picking it up, and then it just became a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure when and where that happened though.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's so that may not necessarily be a detractor from some males attending yoga classes. Like it may actually
Yeah.
encourage them to go, especially if they're single and ready to mingle or something, you know. But it's probably in there for the wrong reasons, right? It's not a dating club, but I just thought that was interesting to me, you know, that just like how did it evolve into where it's like considered to be a feminine thing when it was actually started by males and probably marketed for males at the time or something. Not even really marketed, but you know, instituted. When you talked about withdrawal of the senses, I became pretty curious because that like reminds me of what do they call it? I always mispronounce it. Like ascetics or asceticism or something like that. It's like the denying one of all pleasures and feelings and stuff like that. Like
Okay.
are they trying like so with that is I mean is that part of trying to reach some type of like nirvana or something, or some higher state of being? Is that what the withdrawal of the senses is about? Do you agree with that?
Not so much. It's just there's a couple different ways to look at it, which I've learned yoga is like there's a lot of different interpretations of it.
Mm,
Um, but if you think about like the meditation practice, we start to kind of just let the outside world melt away. Let our senses really start to pick up on. If you're just focusing on your breath, is really focusing and honing on your breath and letting else everything else melt away.
mm,
Another way of thinking about it is just being very aware of what we bring into our bodies, what we bring into our space.
mm,
Um, there's a, I think what it translates to is like denying nourishment, but that doesn't necessarily have to be mean food. It just means anything that's brought in externally from the outside.
mm,
So I've been on a big like silence kick lately, where I I really became more aware of, what am I bringing in through my ears? Because usually I'm always listening to something, a podcast or audiobook or something. And when do I have time to just like not listen to anything and just let my brain just relax?
mm.
So it's that kind of stuff, having intentional fasts, I guess, in quotations, on certain things. That's part of it. You become more mindful. You let your mind do what it's meant to do, right? Just work and think of ideas and not just be constantly like stimulated all the time.
Right. And that's yeah, that's counter to what society is today. You know, it's like constant stimulation. I'm you know where the mind is overstimulated nowadays for the most part, while the
Hmm.
the body is understimulated. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's cool. And I think there's definitely something there. I mean, I know I can speak for myself that when you talk about, like, if you talked to me and told me, like, hey, man, are you interested in, like, a 10-day silent retreat? Like, that, like, creates fear and anxiety in me. Like, what? Like, I can't talk for 10 days? Oh, my God, you know? But I think it's necessary, especially if I'm going to continue along with this practice and develop and become the best version of myself. I think I need to really start getting into that more and more. So I'm lining up some retreats here in Thailand in the
Oh,
very
that's
near
awesome.
future. Right now, I'm just going to sit still for a couple months here. You talked about stillness, so like I'm going to try to sit still as much as I can in my house here in Chiang Mai for at least a couple
Yeah.
months because I've just been going nonstop since, well, I don't know,
Yeah.
since
It's
1997.
yoga. Yeah. When I when I attended yoga teacher training, part of the it wasn't really part of the training, it was more of like a house rule
Mm,
is, there was no talking before I think 8 or 9 in the morning.
mm,
And at first I was like, I don't know about that, but you would wake up in the morning, make your coffee, and the house would be full of people. But it
mm.
was really nice, just like to not have that pressure of having to talk, or I don't know. We would just sit, I would journal, we would just look at each other, and it was very refreshing. I liked it a lot more than I thought I would.
Yeah.
I'm just
Well, I guess
not
it
having to
takes,
talk.
yeah, it takes some of the pressure off of like
Yeah,
small talk or whatever. I don't even
yeah.
know what to talk about, but it reminds me. I used to when I lived in California. My wife and I like every maybe 3 4 months or something. We would wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and we would load in the truck and we would drive from Oxnard all the way down to Temecula. and we would get there or super early in the morning. There is a monastery there called the Meta Forest Monastery, and it's Thai monks and a Thai forest tradition, I believe. And we would get there for morning offerings. So we would get there in time to make our offerings to the monks who come out from the temple, and it's really cool. They come out from the temple and they line up, and then they go by, and you put rice in their bowl, and you gotta like portion it. So you're like, I'm like counting, doo, 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 doo. I'm like, all right, 13 monks, like 13 scoops, you know. And then the last monk is like the dude that's like the lowest in the chain of command, you know. He's like the E2 or whatever of the monks, and so he always gets like the least amount of rice, you know. Which I thought was always kind of entertaining to me. He probably thought it was terrible. Well, he probably didn't think much of it at all. Actually, he's a monk, right? He's probably good with it, right? He's like everything is the way it's supposed to be. But anywho, it just that what you told me reminded me of there was a sign close to the kitchen, and it said basically I might not get this right, but I think it said remember, like before you speak, to ask yourself, is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? And is it the right time and place to say it? And I was like, man, if that's like their standard operating procedure around here, like that makes sense why it's so damn quiet and no one's really
Yeah,
talking around here
exactly.
because they're running it through that filter all the time. So yeah, it's yeah, I could probably use that filter myself. Um, you talked about the eight limbs of yoga, and I practice some Buddhism, and I was wondering, are you familiar with the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, and
Yeah,
are they
I've
similar?
read a little bit. Yeah, there's definitely some parallels when it comes
Mm.
to Buddhism and Hinduism. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Uh, when you talk about like, I think when you talk about Dharma, that's a kind of a very same thing. Like you have I forgot, it's like a star of Dharma. I'm trying to remember in Buddhism,
Oh,
or it's
well,
like,
there's a wheel, so there's the Dharma
yeah,
wheel.
the wheel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with the spokes, and there's eight spokes, so it's eight different parts of the Eightfold Path. Yeah, yeah. So
Mm.
and then the three jewels of Buddhism being the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. But yeah, yeah.
But yeah, all that stuff. I mean, it makes sense because it all kind of came from the same region, you know,
Mm-hmm.
there should be some parallels.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, man. Yeah, I think well, I think you're doing a good job, man, with with this yoga stuff. I think you're definitely breaking it down into a language that many people can understand and relate to. And I check out your stuff on Instagram and TikTok, and some of it, dude, is freaking hilarious. I love it, man. I really do.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Luis. I think I've been mispronouncing your name now for like 10 years. I've been calling you Louis.
You know, that's just part of being in the military. It
Right.
happens. I've gotten
Yeah,
used to
man.
it over 18 years. So
Yeah, man. I worked with a guy once. They called me Mike for like 7 years, and I finally, like after like 2 years of it, I just got done correcting him. And whenever I heard
yeah,
Mike, and I knew it was coming from this guy named Eddie, I was like, "Hey, what's up, Eddie?" Because he was like, every time I would correct him, I'd be like, "Dude, my name is Chris." He'd be like, "Oh, that's right, dude. You remind me of my friend Mike, man. My friend Mike I grew up with." And then after like 2 years, I just answered to Mike. Uh, it was some weird social experiment he was doing on me, like Pavlov's dog or something. He was training me. But yeah, man, really cool stuff. I appreciate you waking up in the middle of the night to come in here and present for Consequence of Habit nonprofit. How can people get in touch with you and get a hold of you if they want you to connect and
uh,
wrap
probably
some.
the easiest way is through Instagram, at the Ordinary Yogi. I also have a podcast where I do weekly meditations, and every week I put out an episode. And I right now it's more of an audio journal talking about my experiences here in Qatar, but I do talk about a lot of yoga things, but try to relate it to modern day and put in my own spin and my own language into it. That's just the Ordinary Yogi podcast. And I put my email and all that stuff too. So if anybody wants to reach out, please feel free.
Awesome, Lise. Appreciate it, brother. I'm gonna let you go, man. Get some rest, and hopefully they let you sleep in a little bit there.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Chris, and thanks you guys again for the opportunity, and happy to do it again sometime.
Awesome, man. Peace. Be well.
All right, later.